We don't even know what Google does with our data.
And we are not saying don't use social media, but educate our kids on how to protect themselves.
There is my data also online that is being monetized. Shouldn't I be paid for that as the person who provides the data? Good afternoon. It's afternoon for me, and it's morning for you, Prof. I am so excited to have the opportunity to talk to you and have you on Cocktail and Blurbs, the show where cocktails do all the talking. I'm kidding. It's an honor to have you on this podcast. Your profile, your work, what you have done, what you have achieved and continue to achieve is so inspiring. I'm gonna start, I'm not even gonna go too much into telling my viewers who you are. I would like you to tell them who you are. But my first question first is, what is your favorite cocktail and why?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. My favorite cocktail is a spicy margarita. I can also go with a Moscow Mule, depending on the time of the day and the stress level. There you go. Wow, I cannot beat that one. So, yeah, I wish we could be there together and have this in person, but really appreciate you inviting me, and also very inspiring what you have done and bringing the whole community together. And yeah, looking forward to our conversation.
No, thank you so much. We definitely will be enjoying a cocktail together soon. Yeah, I mean, with your profile, you were, one of the Canada's 40 under 40 innovators. You were on MIT's, 35 most innovative people. I think that's what it's called, the list on tech, the Tech Review. You were 35 under 35 on the 35 under 35 list, which is really amazing. And your work that you've done building, Flybeats and also being an academic is so inspiring. Just tell me about your education background and what led you, to be you. Like who are you?
Sure. So thanks again. I grew up in Toronto, Canada. I studied computer science at Toronto Metropolitan University. My background has always been in this intersection of artificial intelligence and human-computer interaction. And when I was studying, artificial intelligence was not as popular as today. I had to explain to people what I did, the benefit of that, the differences between how you use AI and data versus more prescriptive computing. And then when I finished my PhD in 2010, I was very fortunate to have a mentor back then, the president of our university, who encouraged me to also commercialize part of my PhD research into a company. His name is Sheldon Levy. He actually has done some very interesting work in Africa, which I will tell you all about it. But this was really a helpful, opportunistic moment for me because I could do discovery-based research and I became a faculty member. I co-founded one of the largest business incubators in Canada that really brought students from different disciplines: fashion, design, business, computer science, mechanical engineering, all together without any silos or walls. And then we empower them and encourage them to build businesses out of their innovation. And that also allowed me to spin off my research into a company called Flybeats, zeros and ones that could fly. That's where the name came from. And with the help of some of our graduate students that I was very privileged to work with, we started a company. So this convergence of doing research, being part of a great group of people who every day you are collaborating and sharing and learning from each other, and at the same time scaling a business with a goal of having an impact, was a very interesting dynamics around what I did. It wasn't just me, it was this whole ecosystem around me, from mentors to great students to great companies and investors, that really came together in an opportunistic way and allowed us to demonstrate our vision in form of impact in the market.
Wow, I mean, it's just so amazing listening to you talking about, obviously, the influence of your parents, which is something I really believe in, because, it has a huge impact on their careers and who we become. But also, as you're talking about the importance of access to mentorship, right? And which also plays a huge role in which are the also two things that I'm very passionate about around, getting young people, especially from disadvantaged communities, to have access to this kind of opportunities. Tell me more about your research. Because I know it's with regards to AI and fintech with Flybits. Tell me, what is Flybits? What do you do?
Sure.
And please try and also be as less technical.
The premises of Flybits when we started it was rooted in this concept that we called it context-aware computing, that we wanted machines, computers, mobile phones to understand their surrounding, and based on that, making information relevant for people when they were using it. And the comparison that I can share with you is that if you go back to the mid-90s and think about the search engines, the ergonomics and the human-computer interaction has always been focused on us searching for the information, looking for the right information, and then finding that out. What we wanted to do with context awareness was to reverse that process. That can we actually use algorithms to send the right information to the right user at the right time? So the paradigm shift was that instead of you searching for the information, we wanted the right information to find you at the right time. And that was the premises of my research, and it was a concept that was introduced almost 30 years ago, and I was very interested in evolving that in my research. So Flybits was built based on this premises, that how do we build easy-to-use tools for non-computer scientists, for non-mathematicians, to be able to use very easy-to-use, learnable tools to create these next-generation context-aware systems. Early on, we applied this to smart cities and transportations. So one of our very early projects, before actually Flybits was a company, was in collaboration with a Swedish company with the European Union to deploy this for the Paris Metro Authority in France. So the idea was that when people brought their mobile phone into the metro system, they could receive very personalized services on their devices. Delays, where do they need to go, where to change their platform. And that really helped us to understand this paradigm. Then we applied this to connected cities. So think about a city or a community, lots of people, different needs, different context. If you have an app, let's say as a digital channel, even you and I may have very different needs. How do we use algorithms for you and I to use the same app, but receive very different set of services? So we did smart cities, we did conferences, we did a lot of work with our investors like Vodafone in the UK and Bosch in Germany. So the company deployed its solution globally around the world, which was very interesting for us as early stage entrepreneurs. And then as we grew the business, we realized this was the lessons learned for us, that it's very difficult for an early stage company to go after so many different verticals all around the world, because we didn't have the capital, we didn't have the bandwidth, we didn't have the team. So what we learned to do was to keep the technology very horizontal, but apply it to a sector that gave us repeatability. And that became the finance sector working with banks because they have a lot of data, they have customers with different needs. So we really tailored our solution so that banks could enable their mobile apps, their web pages, their digital channels with Flybits. So if millions of people go on their channel, they receive very different, personalized, and relevant information. And we used AI to make that experience better and better. So that's a bit of a history on how Flybits evolved.
Wow, because I watched your TEDx that you did in Boston. Actually, that's the first time we met, right? When I also gave my TEDx, I was too tired. I technically ended up reading it from my phone. It was just so fascinating for me, as you were talking about the different, data, that how our data is everywhere. And as soon as you give it to a client or whatever from, you have no control over what happens to it and how it's used. And now in the era of artificial intelligence, obviously, there's a lot of conversation about privacy, copyright, and how is the AI models trained? What's your take on that? Like, should an AI platform, because sometimes for me, I find it complicated. It's difficult for me to actually take a view when I think, that as soon as you post your information online, it's really free for all, right? And then if it ends up on Google, they could, we don't even know what Google does with our data, unless maybe you are in Europe where a lot of change is in the regulations. But even then, you still don't know what they do with that data. Let's listening to you, to your TEDx, and now looking with the work that Flybe is doing, and also how fast AI just took off with the launch of ChatGPT. How do you see that evolving? What's your view on the conversation? Should companies pay for using, other people's IP? But then there is my data also online that is being monetized. Shouldn't I be paid for that as the person who provides the data? What's your view?
I'm so glad that you brought up that question. And by the way, that TEDx meeting that we met each other for the first time, my lesson plan was that never follow a teleprompter, because that was one of the most difficult presentations I have done, following teleprompter. So I'm like, you know what? It's much easier to just come and talk. But anyway, so this is a very important topic that you mentioned, because I'll give you an example. If you go back maybe 15 years ago, when Steve Jobs announced the Apple Store for mobile phones, for iPhone, which really created an ecosystem of creativity. Back then, I could be an entrepreneur, a programmer. I could sit in my basement, create an app, a game or whatever, put it online, and it could grow, and I could have made millions of dollars. If you compare that cycle of innovation with what's happening right now with the co-creation with AI, even if you have the best possible AI capability and algorithmics, without having the data, your innovation is almost worthless. It doesn't mean anything, because AI and data will go hand in hand. And you have no idea how many AI entrepreneurs I meet almost every day that they are frustrated and they complain about, nobody gives us the data, this is taking so long, we need data to do this. Well, that's the physics of AI, because AI and data will go hand in hand. Now, I think most companies around the world, of course, they need to have an AI strategy, but more importantly, they have to have a data strategy before they embark on their AI journey. And when you think about this data ecology, it's a complex ecology, because in that you have data that belongs to us users. You have data that belongs to corporations. You have data that belongs to governments. You have data that belongs to the public. How do you really bring this ecology together and make it simple and easy and privacy preserved to use, and then use it against AI models to create value? And that is something that is not being discussed effectively in the market. One approach is, and we have seen these companies in the past, I don't want to mention names, that they say, hey, I own all of your data. I put it in a data repository like a data lake. I run things on it and I push you things, right? That era is over, and it should be over. I think we need to go from this phase of personalization to participation, that you need to ask the user about permission, what they are looking for, how they want to use their data. And then using this co-creation practice, you generate experiences and capabilities for them that is valuable. So I'm so glad that you mentioned this. I highlighted it in my TEDx talk, but there's also an article that I co-authored with my collaborator, Sandy Pentland, which is called The New Rules of Privacy at the Harvard Business Review. It's available. And we highlight the fact that privacy doesn't mean blocking innovation. Privacy and privacy preservation against AI can actually be an amazing economic growth opportunity, because you create a trust and network effect around your AI capability. So people are now willing to share more data in exchange of value, rather than you disrespecting them or invading on their privacy just for the fact that you want to sell them ads or advertisements. So those are very important things that any AI entrepreneur, irrespective of where they are in the world, they should think about. What is my data strategy? What are the privacy and security guardrails around my data? And then what type of an AI capability do I need to create value for my staff, for my customers, for my citizens? And that paradigm, I think, is really important. And the last thing I say, which I love this area to focus on, is AI privacy and the combination of the two should be very interdisciplinary. You need to bring people from different sectors and disciplines to collaborate. It's no longer an IT project. It's no longer a technical project. You need great designers, right? How do you give comfort to the user that I can share or not share my data? And also, how do you teach kids? That's a fascinating area. How do we partner with authors of children's books to teach our kids how to protect their privacy, telling them that, you know what, when you post that photo on a social media, just understand what happens to your data, how it goes and profiles you. And we are not saying don't use social media, but educate our kids on how to protect themselves against the harm that AI can potentially bring, and teach them to use it effectively. So that's why I am fascinated when we bring designers and people with humanities background, ethics background, data background, collaborating to demonstrate the future of AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I think the discussion around the ethics of AI and I think also the ethics of the companies behind it is something that I am also very much personally interested in, because part of what I've seen is like, I mean, you remember at the beginning when the first generative AI company came up, in terms of how they were using Africans, you know, putting them through hell, going through the data and paying them literally less to nothing. And for me, it gave me such a difficulty, even like morally, even as I use it, to think, oh my God, there's, you know, the, what I call, texploitation keeps happening. And it also, it happens, sometimes it also gets driven and done by some of the companies that are supposedly on the forefront of bringing ethics to technology, and it's also bring also the issue of self-regulation, right? Like how much of it should you give to the company, because if it's driven by profits. And for me, it becomes another issue when as an African, a South African, and knowing, and a Black woman, I know that very little attention is paid to respecting my privacy. The simple thing that I do, for example, because it's something that I'm struggling with, like I use VPN, right? And I always put myself like as if I'm in Germany, because one thing I've seen is I see fewer ads, I see fewer crap even on Twitter and all the things on my timeline, and each and every website I visit, I get like, okay, this is the data that's going to use. Do you agree? And if I reject them all, I'm still able to. If I switch to South Africa, the questions I get asked for every website I go to, I don't get asked, which means my data, when you look at, because you can look at manage the cookies, and then they'll tell you, oh, this is going to be used for this and this and that. I know whether I agree, I'm okay, do I consent to that? But if I switch and I'm in Africa, then those questions are never asked, which means it's okay for that to happen to me because I'm an African, but then they could have those rules in Europe and not have them in Africa, And it's one of those. And also, when you, as excited as we get about AI, it's, for me, it's part of that, the lack of diversity, the lack of respect, which is what this is for people in developing countries, on basically for the poor, because I don't have a say, and that's purely because of how much money I have in the bank or the country that I come from. If I come from Africa, from South Africa, then these companies can do whatever they want. And as we starting now with AI, knowing the importance of data, how do we bring in those issues without being called woke, which is, I had a conversation with one of a person I admire a lot, Chelsea Jackson. She runs a company called Equity Architect. She's actually an American, but based in London. And she leads the racial equity group at the World Economic Forum. And part of the question that we're talking about was that, woke means anti-Black. If you think about it, if somebody says, oh, this is woke, it means you can't talk about racism. As soon as you talk, oh, you being, you can't talk about any issue that deals with diversity for women as well. So it's those things that you anti those things. And why should anybody be against somebody being awake and aware, right? But then how do we then, by the people who are leading, I mean, you are leading the conversation, you are at the forefront, not just as a company with Flightbeats, but with the work that you're doing with MIT, with Connected Science. It gets to things to say, for me, as we're talking, I was like, so how do we talk about these things without the label, without the negativity in it? What's your view?
I think you raised some very important topics that I think we can go on and talk about all of that in details. But one thing, so I want to continue to wear my optimistic hat and think about the convergence of computation, AI, society, and human. And I think a lot of the issues that you mentioned that are very serious issues that we need to address, if we use AI and data effectively and really have a societal and humane way of using it, it will help us to address some of things because it allows us to reduce biases significantly. But it's a double-edged sword. The problem with AI in a lot of the things that are happening, from polarization, racism, all of that, it's a true double-edged sword. It can make it way worse and create terrible echo chambers that really brainwash people. And at the same time, if it's being used and designed correctly, using this human-centered, transparent approach, it has a completely reverse effect that it will reduce biases, allowing us to understand each other better, allowing us to remove biases and bring us together to collaborate. And I want to be in the latter camp. I want to be optimistic about AI, but we need to train and teach and disseminate. How do you use AI to, first of all, allow people to not worry about where they come from or their race or anything, but how they believe in a better world, how they want to collaborate to build a better vision. Because many of us in the world now have access to similar set of resources. We have more or less access to the same computing platforms. We have access to mobile phones, not as a device, but this is creating a platform for equity. And now if we train people to use it effectively, we can really close those gaps. We can remove biases. We can educate the world in a more effective way. And that's the part that I really want to focus on in my career, and especially what I do here at MIT, which is really empowering people and societies and communities to share their views, to share their expertise, to share their knowledge for the purpose of collaboration, to essentially bring better cooperation in the fragmented world that we are seeing at the moment.
Wow. It fascinates me, like, with your work and obviously the ethics of it. How do you see, the role of Flybits? And, because, when I was listening to you, it was so amazing when the example you made about this guy who was buying a house, the way, his information has been everywhere, but he could not, everywhere he goes, he needs to fill in a new form. And in his interview also, but his data also gets sold and everywhere, but he doesn't have control. How do you think, that, for people who have not watched your TEDx, can you explain that on how you see, the solution to that? How do you give, the people their power back?
I think number one is education, 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 and tailoring education for different groups of societies, from corporate leaders to government leaders to students to kids, so they truly understand the physics of data. Physics of data is very different than the physics of the real world, right? How it moves, how it goes from raw data to information to context to wisdom. That's something that I think everyone should be educated on. And I think when we understand that, we will make much better decisions in our companies and in our societies and in our communities on how we use data as a fabric to bring us all together. So what I always say is that in our new economy, data is our new asset class. It's still, money is still important, but data has value, right? But it's a new asset. But trust is the new currency. Like, if data and trust go hand in hand, that we can really form trust and measure trust, which is a big thing, then I think we can form very interesting new economic models that is benefiting everyone and is more inclusive. So number one, education. And then the second one is to looking at the physics of data, not just through the lens of a computer scientist or a data scientist, but through the lens of a designer, through the lens of an ethics expert, through the lens of a government, and making sure that we can bring all of these stakeholders to really figure out how this new data ecology can look like. So those are the things that I think about. It's less about AI. AI, basically what AI is, if I really want to summarize it, it's patterns of data and understanding patterns of data. Whether you want to use a large language model or a small model, a numerical model, they are just data. And then you have different techniques to look at the patterns and do something with it. But if you don't have data to look at, you don't have AI. So I think if you figure out that first, I mean, we teach our kids mathematics, physics, and chemistry. Let's teach them data and information and how it grows and how it's managed. And I think with that, we can introduce a whole new economic model. And that is why I am also very, very interested and passionate about the potential in Africa, because there is a huge potential to be a leader in this space and really create an ecosystem with the talent that is available there, with access to technology that is available there, to really lead an economy that many other countries and many other continents are struggling to build it correctly, because they need to deconstruct a lot of the wrong architectures that they had and rebuild again. But I think Africa has a huge potential to do it right much faster than others. And I work with different organizations, from organizations in South Africa, from telecom carriers to supermarkets, and how they come together to collaborate. We worked on a microfinancing strategies for tribes in Kenya, allowing women to sell their jewelries directly online using e-commerce, and understand the data and help them. These are fascinating things to work on. But again, you need to educate, and you need to bring the right people with the right motive on board to create that value.
Yeah, and I think that's when you're talking about the motives is one of the most important, things. I mean, I was involved in the team within the World Economic Forum that was working on putting together ideas, the G20 with India, who held the presidency. Now it will be going to Brazil, and then it will come to South Africa. Look at how the work that is started, and a big part of it is like actually looking at the data. And as somebody who's in Africa, and it's something that I'm passionate about, which I already mentioned, is the motives. It's like, okay, what is being done with our data? Because the same protections that will be provided for somebody who's in Europe is not being provided in Africa, right? And also the way that those data will be used, I would not know, because at the end of the day, it seems like because I'm African, I don't matter. And it goes to the point with now we are a very young generation, Africans, we are a young generation, more young people, and which means we're starting to ask questions, right? And the question is a lot of the stuff we always say is like, we are not our ancestors. So we don't want people to come with sort of which also part I call like the data colonization, which is one of those things where we're going to take it, we're going to profit from it, and you're going to get nothing of it. You don't even know what we're talking about. So it gets to that way you feel like the collaboration in terms of how much we collaborate with outsiders, it's no longer popular within the electoral system, or rather the electorate who are younger or more woke, for lack of a better word. So those questions get asked. And then for me, it gets back to say, when we talk about a lot of the potential in Africa, but it's very difficult for me because, as somebody who's been reading a lot, like I was talking to my kids, I'm like, the same things that are being said now, my son who is doing his entrepreneurship with Georgetown, I was reading, one of his readers. I was like, this is the same thing when I was doing first year that was being said about Africa. And now is the same thing that is being said again now. And one of the problems that for me, when I talk to somebody who's outside of Africa, and when we look at the motive and the intentions, my first question that I have in mind, which give me the skepticism, is most of the time people from outside, they see Africa as a market. So they want to make money from us, but they don't want to work with us, right? They see us as a market, but they don't see us as collaborators. And if that respect is not there, then the outcome, it would be from a point of, we see Africa as an investment destination, but we're not going to invest in Africans. And you could see even with the global companies that are there, you look at who the leaders are, you'll find that somebody was, I'll make an example and I will name this company specifically when I'll talk to you. Like, for example, Amazon's development team is based in Cape Town. And from the last time I checked, 80% of them were Europeans. But then it looks good on paper to say our development is, our data center, whatever, is in Africa. But Africans don't run it. Africans have no say. Africans, you know what I mean? So from your perspective, when you talk about the opportunity in Africa, how do you see, you know, in terms of even with the collaboration, like the kind of structure, what do you see as the opposite, the opportunity for Africans or the opportunity, you know, for people to come and do what has been happening all the time with our mines, our minerals, exploiting us, and then we end up getting nothing, right? We provide the gold, we provide the diamonds, and yet we are, how are we still the poorest continent? It makes no sense.
Perhaps I can share with a personal observation, and then I can share some of the thoughts that I have had and some of the initiatives that we have had. Just sharing a Flybits example, we work with banks all around the world. And about 2 years ago, we worked with a bank in Nigeria. My team was so impressed about the talent, about the quality, about the speed of this customer, that we were like, wow, it's unbelievable how much talent is there, that it's in a way that we are also learning from them on how they use our tools. I wish there was a way that we could broadcast this and say, look at this talent. Some of the largest companies we work with around the world have challenges with the basics. These guys took our tools, built it, and now showing things about our capabilities that we didn't even think about. And these were young kids, came out of school, working for this bank to really take the bank through its digital transformation journey. That was, and we continue to have that relationship, but that should be broadcasted, that should be promoted, that story should be told. The talent is there. Access to computing resources are there. The innovation potential is there. And how do you really bring everyone together? So rather than becoming a service provider to the rest of the world, you double down on the niche areas that you can build in Africa and in collaboration with African countries. So others come and say, I want to license that from you. Not necessarily hire talent. You can always hire talent there for different reasons. But that technology came from this group of companies or organizations working together, and now we want to benefit from that. And I'll give you an example. When I was in school, I worked in one of the European funded research projects. So it brought about 15 companies and universities and government organizations from around Europe together to collaborate. And this is still a program in Europe with the goal of creating extra collaboration between countries and entities. And there is a history about that on why they did this, why they want this collaboration, to make sure that Europe maintains its kind of uniformity when it comes to research agenda. I am sure there are programs like that in Africa, but that should be elevated, right? That should be elevated to say, you know what, a program that I need a telco and a bank and 3 universities and this talent and startups, right? Encourage entrepreneurship and surround the organizations with that entrepreneurial mindset. That is going to be an engine. And because of the potential that is there, in a few years, it's going to become an example that many others will just need to come and follow, right? But it needs leadership, it needs intent, And it's much easier to do that now compared to 20 years ago because technology is there, infrastructure is there. Communications infrastructure in many parts of Africa is way better than some of the even European countries in terms of connectivity and speed and all of that.
Yeah. I've traveled enough to know, like, I'm like, Wi-Fi is so slow in a lot of European countries, and also in the US. In California, I was like, what? Am I in California, Silicon Valley?
So with that, I mean, the other unique thing is this is again what I always say, and this is what I did in Canada. Everyone wants to be the next Silicon Valley. That's a very wrong mindset. Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley because it focused on its core strength and built it.
Yes.
Canada, for example, instead of saying, oh, I want to create another Silicon Valley, hey, we have natural resources, we have minerals, we have fisheries, we have agriculture. Build centers of excellence around that. Don't try to mimic Silicon Valley. And I think if you look at countries in Africa and then distill that into a collaboration framework around AI and data, there are so many things and the talent is available and the resources are available that frankly, you don't need anyone else to come and, learning from the past. So that's the exciting part. And you have the right corporate leaders, you have companies that, your telcos, for example, without mentioning a name, one of the unique things about them is that they are a telco, but they are also a bank. They are also a loyalty program provider. That itself, that means you have such data ecology in your company that it's the dream of some of the largest telecom carriers in the US to have access to all of that together, to be a bank, to be a telecom carrier, to be a card issuer, and to be a loyalty program provider. Double down on that. Show what the future of this cross-industry solutions can look like in Africa. M-Pesa, great example. It became a standard for so many other countries to follow. We can have 100 more M-Pesas because it doubled down on what worked in Africa rather than we want to replicate something from Europe.
No, that's amazing. I like what you said because earlier this week I spoke to one of our former Minister of Finance, and we're talking about that exactly, to say we need to focus on our strength. We need to focus on what we have. We need to have a strategy for innovation to say, what is it that we want? Because some of the problems is that, is this, I want to be everything. And then you end up being nothing really, because you don't have a strong focus. And most of the time, I think I always, for me, somebody who have some, I would say, communist kind of, thinking because of, the background and of, poverty that I've seen, is that there's a lot of this colonial mindset that makes us feel like our ideas are not good enough. I mean, when somebody talk about Cash App in the US, oh, it's an innovation, I'm like, oh my God, we've been doing this for over almost 20 years. There's nothing new about that. And then like, oh my God, you're still using cash books. I'm like, nobody uses cash book in South Africa, nobody. Like if you say you've got a cash book, it's like, what do you mean you've got a cash book, And there's so much that we have. And part of the project, one project I'm working on, building a supersonic airplane. And one of the guys I was talking to is a we've got the expertise. Obviously, I'm not an engineer, so we were talking to them. They've got some expertise in supersonic and hydrogen, and then I was like, and then he said to me, "Oh my God, the only thing I can advise you on is really just how to incorporate hydrogen into your project, because when you have all the skills, the tools that you need in the country, and the people that you're collaborating with, the only thing I can do for you is, as your advisor, is just really to just help you so that nobody can come and bullshit you. It's very easy when you, sorry for that language, it's very easy when you don't know something, people can come and just speak big words and you don't understand, you know what I mean? So it was like, oh, the only thing I can do is just to make sure that what you are being provided is technically sound. But in terms of the capabilities and the talent and everything, you have it in South Africa. He was like, I don't even understand why you are actually not leaders in aviation. And it goes back to, obviously, the lack of, I think, clear strategy in terms of what is it that we're good at, what is it that we're strong at, and then invest in that and making sure that we build the capabilities and the industries and the ecosystem that would make the industry flourish. But this has been really amazing. Yeah, you had a point.
And I think on that note, which I totally agree, I believe in globalization as a force that, if being used correctly, not exploitation, but proper globalization, we can collaborate. No one is saying we want to have a protectionist view and we don't want to collaborate, we only want to keep it to Africa. But bring things that you want and build new things with it and repurpose it for a new market, rather than expecting others to come and kind of prescribe things, because that you don't need it, and then there is no need for that. And there are examples around the world, in Brazil and others, that you create whole new industry by leveraging bits and pieces around the world, but bring it together and then really create a national or a cross-national strategy. And with data and AI, that's much easier than heavy industries of the past.
No, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. I think we have a lot to talk about. You're gonna have to send me your number, because I had to send an email. That takes long. So I need to say, because I'm just listening to, there's so much that we can collaborate on, and the opportunities that I'm seeing. And also, I need us to talk again. You know, there's so many issues that you mentioned and touched on, but due to time, I can't really, you know, we can't explore and talk more. So I think we need to have a specific AI conversation, at least for an hour, where we just focus on those issues and the technical bit. And also what, you know, for me, you spoke about the potential of Africa. We need to just have that conversation in terms of how do you see and unpack that, because a lot of my viewers and the young people, you know, that I work with is them to get to hear and see how other people, like, you know, see them, because sometimes it's that, oh, we're not as good enough, we're not smart enough, but it's always great just to, you know, it starts with seeing yourself as capable, and that is critical. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks to your viewers. And looking forward to staying in touch. And big kudos to you for running such a great initiative to really demonstrate the impact of the continent.
No, thank you so much. And we will definitely catch up, and I will be sending you, I think you need to, this can't just be a podcast. I think I need an interview. I need you to come to South Africa. I need to figure out how, but we need to talk. If you were to make a cocktail that represents Hossein, what would it be? What would you call it? And what ingredients would be in it, and why?
That's a tough one. I will make a gin drink, maybe a gin and tonic with some additional herbs in it. Thinking out loud with you, but it's gonna be a gin drink. Maybe I have rosemary in it. So that's what I will come up with right now.
No, thank you so much, and thank you for your time, and we'll definitely be in touch about your visit and other cool things I think we could do together.
So much. Thank you for having me. All the best to you and your team. Take care.